My wife told me she, accidentally, forgot to book my flight to her sister's wedding, a destination wedding in Hawaii that I had fully paid for. She looked me right in the eye and said, "Sorry, honey, everything is booked solid. You'll have to stay home." She thought I would just roll over and accept it. She thought I was just a walking wallet. But she didn't realize that while she was planning her secret fun in the sun, I was planning something else entirely. I simply told her, "It is what it is," and then, I vanished. Welcome back to Inspiration Seeker. If you love stories about instant karma, sweet revenge, and people getting exactly what they deserve, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment below saying, "Not on my dime." Let's see if we can get this video to 5,000 likes. Now, let's get into the story. My name is Mark. To understand why I did what I did, you first need to understand the dynamic of my marriage. I'm a senior architect at a firm just outside of Chicago. I've spent the last 20 years grinding, building a reputation, and securing a very comfortable life. I didn't mind the hard work because I thought I was building a future for us. Us, being me and my wife, Cynthia. Cynthia hasn't worked a full-time job in about 8 years. She told me she wanted to focus on charity work and managing the household, which mostly consisted of brunches, shopping trips, and planning events for her high-maintenance family. I was the financial pillar, the bedrock, and honestly, I was fine with that role. I loved her, and I wanted her to be happy. So, when her younger sister Pamela announced she was getting married, I knew what was coming. Pamela had always dreamed of a destination wedding in Maui, but she and her fiancé didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. One evening, Cynthia sat me down with tears in her eyes. She gave me this whole speech about how it was Pamela's one shot at happiness and how it would mean the world to the family if we could help out. By help out, she meant funding the entire thing. We are talking flights, a block of rooms at a 5-star luxury resort, the reception, the catering, the works. The price tag was north of $50,000. I hesitated, sure, but Cynthia was relentless. She promised this would be the family vacation of a lifetime. I eventually caved and handed over my credit card. For the next 3 months, our house turned into a war room of wedding planning. Or so I thought. Cynthia was constantly on her phone, texting furiously at all hours of the night. Whenever I walked into the room, she'd flip her screen over or quickly change the subject. "Just coordinating with the florist, Mark," she'd chirp, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Pamela is just so stressed." I tried to be involved. I asked about the itinerary, the guest list, the flight schedules. But every time I asked a question, I was stonewalled. "Don't worry about the details, honey," Cynthia would say, patting my arm dismissively. "You're paying for everything. The least we can do is handle the logistics so you can relax." It felt odd. I had this gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach that I was being managed, not included. But I pushed it down. I told myself I was just being paranoid. After all, I was the hero of this story, right? I was the generous husband making dreams come true. I didn't realize then that I wasn't the hero in their eyes. I was just the golden goose, and they were getting ready to pluck me clean. Fast forward to 48 hours before takeoff. The house was cluttered with open suitcases, sunscreen bottles, and new resort wear. I was in the bedroom, folding my shirts, actually looking forward to a break from the office. I figured even if I was just the wallet for this trip, I could at least enjoy a Mai Tai by the pool. That's when Cynthia walked in. She wasn't packing. She was wringing her hands, pacing back and forth with this look of manufactured distress plastered on her face. It was a performance I'd seen before, usually when she scratched the car or overspent the budget, but this felt heavier. She sat on the edge of the bed, took a deep breath, and dropped the bombshell. "Honey, I don't know how to tell you this," she started, her voice trembling slightly, "but there's been a massive mix-up with the travel agent. It's a clerical error. A glitch in the system." I stopped folding. "What kind of glitch?" "Well," she continued, refusing to meet my eyes, "Pamela and I were going over the final confirmations today, and, We realized your ticket wasn't booked. We thought it was, but the system kicked it back. And because it's peak wedding season, the flight is completely sold out. There isn't a single seat left on any flight out of Chicago for 3 days. I stared at her. Okay. I can fly out later. What about the hotel? She grimaced. That's the other thing. The resort, they gave away your room. Since the flight wasn't confirmed, the system auto-canceled the suite. The entire island is booked solid, Mark. There's literally nowhere for you to stay. Let's pause for a second. I want you to really process the absurdity of this. I am the one footing the bill. I paid for Pamela's flight. I paid for Cynthia's flight. I paid for the bridesmaids, the cousins, and people I barely know. And yet, I was the only person who suffered a clerical error? In the age of digital confirmations and smartphone apps, you don't just forget to book the person paying for the trip unless you specifically intend to exclude them. I looked at my wife. I saw the slight twitch in her eye. She was waiting for me to explode. She expected me to scream, to call the airline, to demand she fix it. She was ready for a fight, and she probably had a script ready to make me look like the bad guy for ruining her sister's vibe. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. Something inside me just shut off. The love, the concern, the anger, it all just evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I slowly put my shirt back in the drawer. I zipped up my empty suitcase and set it in the corner. Then, I turned to her with a completely blank expression and shrugged. Well, I said, my voice steady and flat. That happens. You girls go have fun. Don't worry about me. Cynthia blinked, stunned. She opened her mouth to say something, probably to offer a fake apology, but I had already walked out of the room. I was done. The morning of the flight was a masterclass in awkwardness. Cynthia gave me a quick, guilty peck on the cheek, mumbled something about bringing me back a souvenir, and hurried out the door with Pamela. They looked relieved. Actually, they looked ecstatic. They were practically skipping to the Uber. The moment their taillights faded around the corner, the silence in the house was deafening. But I didn't sit around moping. I didn't crack open a beer and watch sports. I went straight to my home office and booted up my desktop. If they thought I was just going to sit home like a good little puppy waiting for its master to return, they were dead wrong. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was an auditor. And I was about to conduct the most thorough audit of my life. I logged into my primary credit card portal, the one I had handed over for the wedding expenses. I started scrolling through the transaction history. It was a sea of charges, florists, caterers, dress shops. But then, I saw it. A charge for an additional ocean view suite at the resort. It was booked under a name that made my blood run cold. Bruce. Let me tell you about Bruce. Bruce was my roommate back in college. He was the guy who borrowed money and never paid it back, the guy who hit on everyone's girlfriend. 4 years, Cynthia claimed she couldn't stand him. She called him annoying, gross, and arrogant. She had systematically cut him out of my life, telling me he was a bad influence. So why was I paying $4,000 for his room in Hawaii? My hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from pure adrenaline. I needed more than just a receipt. I needed the smoking gun. We shared a family cloud account for our phone backups, something I set up years ago to save photos. I don't think she realized that her iMessages were syncing to the shared iPad I kept in my desk drawer. I powered on the tablet and there it was. The entire conversation history. It wasn't just a wedding trip, it was a reunion. I scrolled through weeks of messages between Cynthia and Bruce. Can't wait to see you, she wrote. Mark is so clueless, he's paying for everything. And then, the kicker, we told him there was a booking error. He bought it. We have the whole week to ourselves. They weren't just excluding me. They were laughing at me. They were planning a romantic getaway on my dime, using the wedding as a cover, while I sat at home. The betrayal was total. But as I read those texts, the last remnant of my marriage died. I didn't feel heartbreak anymore. I felt like a general planning a war. I didn't smash anything. I didn't scream. I didn't call Bruce to threaten him. That's what an amateur does. That's emotional, and emotions lead to mistakes. I needed to be surgical. I looked at the clock. They were currently at 30,000 feet, somewhere over the Midwest, sipping champagne that I paid for. They were unreachable for the next 8 hours. That was my window of opportunity. I picked up the phone, but I didn't call a lawyer first. I called the bank. You see, the credit card Cynthia was using, the one with the high limit that was funding this entire Hawaiian escapade, was solely in my name. I had added her as an authorized user years ago to build her credit score. That meant I had total control. I got a representative on the line. Hi, this is Mark. I believe my card has been compromised. I need to report it lost or stolen immediately. The rep was helpful. Certainly, sir. We'll cancel the current card number effective immediately and issue a freeze on the account. Thank you, I said. And please ensure no recurring charges or pending authorizations go through. I want a hard stop on everything. Click. Just like that, the plastic card in Cynthia's purse turned into a worthless piece of scrap metal. But I wasn't done. I logged into our joint savings account. In our state, marital assets are generally split 50-50, but I wasn't going to wait for a judge to tell me that while she drained the account from a beach chair. I transferred exactly 50% of the balance, my legal share, into a brand new account at a completely different bank that she didn't know existed. I left her half there, so she couldn't claim I left her destitute, but I made sure my money was untouchable. Next, I called Henry. Henry is a divorce attorney I know through work. He's expensive, aggressive, and hates losing. He's the kind of guy you hire when you want to burn the bridge and the river underneath it. Henry, I said, I need to file for divorce. Today. On the grounds of adultery. I need proof, Mark, Henry replied, his voice gravelly and serious. I have flight manifests, hotel receipts booked in her lover's name on my card, and time-stamped text messages admitting to the affair and the deception, I said. I'm emailing you the PDF right now. I could practically hear Henry smiling through the phone. That'll do, Mark. That'll do just fine. I hung up. The financial trap was set. The legal trap was armed. Now, it was time to disappear. With the finances frozen and the legal sharks circling, I turned my attention to the physical world. I had about 6 hours left before their plane touched down in Maui. I looked around the house, the home I had worked so hard to buy, the walls I had painted, the floors I had refinished. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. And I was erasing the evidence of my existence. I called a moving company that specialized in emergency relocations. They arrived within the hour. I didn't take everything. I wasn't petty. I left the furniture she liked, the kitchenware, the decorations. But everything that was mine, my clothes, my electronics, my books, my tools, my grandfather's watch, went into boxes. We worked in silence. Within 3 hours, my presence in the house was completely scrubbed. My side of the closet? Empty. My drawers? Bare. The home office? Cleared out, leaving just the desk and the chair. It was eerie how quickly a person's life could be packed up. I drove my car, my pride and joy, to a long-term storage garage 3 towns over. I wasn't going to leave it in the driveway for her to use or sell. I prepaid for 6 months of storage. Then, I did something that felt like something out of a spy movie. I bought a prepaid burner phone from a convenience store and tossed my old SIM card into a sewer grate. I didn't want her calling me. I didn't want her texting me. I wanted total radio silence. I went back to the house one last time. It was quiet. Shadows were lengthening across the floor. I walked into the kitchen and placed a single manila envelope on the granite countertop. Inside were the printouts of her texts with Bruce, the hotel receipts showing his name, and the divorce petition Henry had drafted. No note. No goodbye. No How could you? Just the cold, hard evidence. I locked the front door behind me and dropped the key through the mail slot. I hailed a cab to the airport, but I wasn't going to Hawaii. I boarded a flight to Montana, where I had rented a secluded cabin deep in the mountains. As the plane took off, I looked down at the sprawling city of Chicago one last time. I felt lighter than I had in years. The Mark she knew was gone. I wasn't there to see it happen, but thanks to the frantic notifications blowing up my email, which was the only thing I hadn't deactivated, I could picture the scene perfectly. It must have been beautiful. They touched down in Maui, greeted by the warm tropical breeze and the scent of hibiscus. Cynthia, Pamela, and Bruce likely hopped into a shuttle, laughing, probably making jokes about poor Mark, stuck back in the cold Midwest. They had no idea they were walking into a buzzsaw. They arrived at the resort, a 5-star palace on the beach. They walked up to the front desk, confident and arrogant. I imagined Cynthia slapping that platinum card on the marble counter with a flourish. "Checking in for the wedding party," she would have said. Then came the sound. The sound that every credit card holder dreads, but for me, it was the symphony of justice. Beep. Beep. Declined. The receptionist probably smiled politely and asked to try again. Beep. Beep. Declined. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the clerk would say. "This card has been reported stolen. We cannot process the payment." I can visualize the color draining from Cynthia's face. The panic setting in. She pulls out her phone to call me. "Mark will fix this," she thinks. She dials my number. But instead of my voice, she hears a robotic operator. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." That's when the reality hit. She tried the backup emergency card I gave her years ago. She swiped it, hoping to save the day. But she didn't know I had lowered the credit limit to exactly $100 just before I left the house. Approved, for a ham sandwich maybe, but certainly not for a $20,000 block of hotel rooms. The chaos must have been biblical. The hotel manager explaining that without payment now, the rooms would be released to the waiting list. Pamela, the bridezilla, realizing the venue fee hadn't been authorized yet. And Bruce? My friend Bruce? He stood there with his pockets inside out. He's broke. He was banking on a free ride. They were stranded in the lobby of the most expensive resort in Maui with a mountain of luggage and $0. Pamela was likely screaming at Cynthia. Cynthia was crying, trying to get a hold of anyone who could help. The wedding party was looking at them like they were insane. The vacation of a lifetime had just turned into a hostage situation, and the ransom was a bill they couldn't pay. They didn't last the week. From what I gathered later, they barely lasted 2 days. Cynthia had to beg Pamela's new in-laws for money just to buy economy tickets back home. Imagine the humiliation, the woman who was supposed to be the grand benefactress of the wedding, now begging the groom's parents for charity just to get off the island. Cynthia arrived back at our house a week later. She didn't come back with a tan or happy memories. She came back looking 10 years older, dragging her suitcase up the driveway of a home she thought was her sanctuary. She put her key in the lock, probably expecting to find me sitting on the couch, angry but present. She probably had a whole speech prepared, tears, gaslighting, turning it around to make me feel bad for abandoning her. But when she opened the door, the speech died in her throat. The house echoed. It wasn't just quiet, it was hollow. The living room was stripped of my books, my electronics, my recliner. The walls where my diplomas and photos used to hang were bare, leaving only faint rectangles of lighter paint. It looked like a ghost town. She walked through the rooms, calling my name, her voice bouncing off the hardwood floors. "Mark, Mark, are you here?" There was no answer. She finally made her way to the kitchen. The only thing left on the pristine granite countertop was that single manila envelope. Her hands must have been shaking as she tore it open. She pulled out the stack of papers. First, the flight manifests. Then, the hotel receipts with Bruce's name highlighted in yellow. And finally, the text messages. The screenshots of her mocking me, calling me clueless, planning her affair. She collapsed onto the floor. In that moment, she realized this wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't a fight she could cry her way out of. This was the end. She scrambled for her phone. She called my parents. They didn't answer. She called my office. My secretary told her I was on indefinite leave and instructed her not to call again. She called our mutual friends, people who had been to our barbecues and holiday parties. They had all seen the evidence I sent them. They didn't want to talk to her. She sat alone in the middle of that empty kitchen, surrounded by the debris of her own choices. She had no husband, no money, a pending divorce, and a reputation that was currently in flames. The reality check didn't just bounce, it hit her like a freight train. For the next 365 days, I was a ghost. I didn't disappear from the world, but I disappeared from her world completely. I settled into that cabin in Montana, surrounded by pine trees and silence, a stark contrast to the noise and deception of my life in Chicago. My firm was surprisingly understanding. They allowed me to work remotely, managing designs from my laptop on the porch with a cup of coffee in hand. I didn't just sit around though. I used that year to rebuild. For the first time in decades, I wasn't stressed about credit card bills or funding someone else's lifestyle. I started hiking every morning. I hit the gym in the local town. I ate real food. The dad bod I had developed from years of stress eating and late nights at the office melted away. I dropped 30 pounds, put on muscle, and grew a beard. I looked in the mirror and finally recognized the man staring back at me. But while I was finding peace, Cynthia was spiraling. I had instructed Henry, my bulldog of a lawyer, to handle every single piece of communication. I told him, I don't want to hear her voice. I don't want to see her face. If she needs something, she talks to you. That didn't stop her from trying though. My email spam folder became a graveyard of desperation. At first, the messages were angry. How could you do this to me? You're overreacting. Then, when the reality of her financial situation set in, the tone shifted to panic. Mark, the mortgage is due. Mark, please, I can't pay the electric bill. Finally, came the begging. I miss you. Bruce meant nothing to me. Please, just come home. I never replied. Not once. I didn't even open most of them. Through Henry, I got the updates on the wreckage I left behind. It was exactly as I predicted. Bruce. As soon as he realized the free ride gravy train had derailed and Cynthia was cut off from my bank account, he vanished. He dumped her before she even unpacked her bags. He was a parasite, and she was a dry host. Her family turned on her, too. Pamela blamed Cynthia for ruining her wedding memories, claiming the drama overshadowed her big day. And the house? The beautiful suburban home Cynthia loved so much? She couldn't afford the property taxes, let alone the mortgage, on zero income. She was forced to sell it at a loss just to cover her debts and legal fees. She moved into a small apartment across town, working a retail job to make ends meet. While she was watching her life shrink, I was watching the sun rise over the mountains, breathing in the fresh air of freedom. I wasn't just surviving the divorce, I was thriving in it. Exactly 1 year to the day after I boarded that plane to Montana, I returned to Chicago. I wasn't there to reminisce. I was there for the final arbitration, the signature that would legally sever me from Cynthia forever. I walked into the high-rise building where the mediation was taking place. I caught my reflection in the glass doors. I didn't look like the stressed-out, hunch-shouldered architect who left. I was tanned from a year of hiking. My suit, a new one I bought for the occasion, fit perfectly over my broader shoulders. I felt calm, grounded. I took the elevator up to the 40th floor and walked into the conference room. Henry was already there, shuffling papers. He looked up and grinned. You look like $1 million, Mark, he said. I feel like it, I replied. Then, the door opened, and Cynthia walked in. If I needed any confirmation that I made the right choice, seeing her in that moment was it. She looked diminished. The arrogance was gone. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She was wearing a dress I recognized, one she bought years ago, and she looked thinner, but not in a healthy way. The stress of the last year, the embarrassment, the financial struggle, it was all etched on her face. She stopped dead when she saw me. Her eyes went wide. She scanned me from head to toe, clearly shocked by the transformation. She probably expected to see a broken man, someone begging to come back. Instead, she saw someone who had outgrown her. She took a step toward me, her voice cracking. "Mark." She reached a hand out, tears instantly welling up in her eyes. "Mark, please. Can we just talk? Without the lawyers. Just for 5 minutes." I didn't flinch. I didn't feel a pang of guilt. I didn't feel anything. I didn't even look her in the eye. I simply pulled out my chair, sat down next to Henry, and opened my folder. "My lawyer will handle the talking," I said, my voice level and devoid of emotion. She stood there for a moment, mouth open, waiting for the old Mark to cave. Waiting for the checkbook to open. But that man was dead. She slowly sank into her chair on the other side of the long mahogany table. The silence in the room was heavy, but for me, it wasn't awkward. It was the silence of victory. The actual legal proceedings were surprisingly short. Because I had been so meticulous with my record keeping, the credit card statements showing the unauthorized travel for Bruce, the text messages proving the premeditated affair, Cynthia didn't have a leg to stand on. In our state, financial infidelity is taken almost as seriously as the physical kind. The judge looked at the evidence, looked at Cynthia, and essentially threw the book at her. I kept the bulk of my retirement. I kept my investments. And because she had deliberately tried to defraud me, the judge denied her request for alimony. I watched as she signed the settlement papers, her hand trembling, realizing that her glitch had cost her everything. I signed my name next. It was the most expensive signature of my life, but it bought the most valuable thing in the world, my freedom. I walked out of the courthouse and took a deep breath. The air in Chicago smelled like exhaust and concrete, but to me, it smelled like victory. I loosened my tie and headed toward the parking lot. As I approached my vehicle, I heard familiar voices raised in anger. I looked over 2 rows of cars and saw them. Cynthia and Bruce. Apparently, in her desperation and loneliness, she had reached out to him again, or maybe he had sniffed around thinking she got a payout. Whatever the reason, they were miserable. They were arguing by a rusted-out sedan, gesturing wildly, faces twisted in resentment. They looked trapped in a cycle of toxicity that I was no longer part of. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I just kept walking. I climbed into my new truck, a rugged 4x4 I bought for the mountains. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed on the dashboard. The screen lit up with a photo of a smiling woman with kind eyes. It was Alice, the doctor I had met in Montana. We had been taking it slow, going on hikes, cooking dinner, actually talking. "Hey," I answered, putting the truck in gear. "I'm all done here." "That's good news," Alice's warm voice came through the speakers. "The coffee is on. Drive safe." "I'm on my way," I said. I pulled out of the lot, driving past Cynthia and Bruce without even glancing in the rearview mirror. I hit the highway, heading west, back to the mountains, back to Alice, and back to a life that was finally truly mine. It's been 5 years since I drove out of that courthouse parking lot. People often ask me if I ever looked back, if I ever regretted blowing up my life over a plane ticket. The answer is, never for a second. Alice and I got married 2 years ago in a small ceremony right here in the mountains. No $50,000 budget, no drama, just close friends and family who actually care about us. We started our own boutique design firm that specializes in eco-friendly cabins. Life is quiet, honest, and incredibly full. As for Cynthia, I don't keep tabs on her, but in a small world, news travels. A mutual friend told me she's still in Chicago, bouncing between retail jobs. Apparently, she and Bruce stayed together for a while in a toxic on-again off-again cycle until he got arrested for a DUI. She's still paying off the debts from that era. Sometimes, late at night, I see a notification that a fake profile viewed my LinkedIn page. I know it's her. She's looking for the life she threw away. But she won't find it there. That life is gone. The lesson I learned wasn't just about money or infidelity. It was about self-respect. When someone shows you, clearly and undeniably, that you don't matter to them, believe them. And then, have the courage to walk away. Because the moment you stop trying to buy someone's love is the moment you can finally afford your own happiness. And that, my friends, is the story of how I turned a missed flight into a brand new life. What would you have done in Mark's shoes? Would you have stayed and fought, or would you have disappeared into the mountains just like he did? I want to hear your take in the comments section below. If this story gave you some satisfaction, please do me a huge favor. Hit that like button, it really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story from Inspiration Seeker. We post new stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption every week. Thanks for watching, stay strong, and remember, sometimes the best way to win the game is to stop playing. See you in the next video.